Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Okay, so this episode is probably one of the more evil things Professor Pericles has done. Essentially, that's just what this episode establishes. He kind of goes it's kind of established that he kind of goes a little bit off the deep end here. But, or rather, he was already in the deep end and now he's finally starting to swim. I don't know what the actual analogy would be here, but, in any case, it's, kind of bad. But, in any case, this episode, The Horrible Herd, was set about, well, a thing he created, The Horrible Herd. So, it starts off with the cold open, where, we see the farmer that had Scooby-Doo held prisoner on his farm. He's talking with his wife when we find out is that he's just a very gruff person, in general. It's just not just towards Scooby, just in general, he's a very gruff and rough person. He proceeds to go on to explain. There's case in point. She makes a glass of lemonade. She asks him how it is, and he's very much responds that she doesn't really need to seek for validation all the time, and that he's drinking it, and that should be enough for her. Which, yeah, he comes off a little bit rude, which is fair. That's been his only established character trait up until now. In case, as he and his wife are arguing about the quality of the lemonade, he then proceeds to shush her, which she takes offense to, but then he points out that but then he points out to actually shut up, which and then proceeds to listen, and she notes that the sounds that they know that there's a strange noise, and she notes that it sounds like cattle, but she points out that they must be restless, but he points out that they don't really have cattle on the farm. He pointing out that he hasn't had a herd of cattle on the farm in 25 years. And to be fair, he's somewhat telling the truth here. We've only seen him have the one cow, so yeah, he definitely does not keep like a large herd of cattle. He only has like the one that he uses to milk, but that's about it. And sure enough, it's at this point where the power goes out on his farm. He grabs the flashlight to wonder what exactly is going on, and then we actually see the Horrible Herd just standing in his field. And of course they don't. And of course they point. And of course he makes a joke about how either his wife's sister has shown up, or this is the ugliest group of cows he's ever seen. And and this is where they actually start calling it the Horrible Herd. And then so at this point where the herd then proceeds to swarm their property and start chewing up the place. And they barely get away from it by climbing up onto the silo. And it just proceeds to level his entire farm to the ground. Meanwhile, Mystery Incorporated, they're currently on a date at Scooby is on a date at the Blaze Steak with Nova, and they're eating garbage scraps, which is fair. They're dogs, and Scooby very much tells Nova that he wants her to have the first bite, so she starts digging in, and then he proceeds to join her. At which point, while the other four members of Mystery Incorporated are actually still talking about the flintlock pistol that they found. And Daphne is actually looking longingly at Scooby's table because it's been firmly established that she's since redeveloped feelings for Fred. That was a thing in the first season, didn't end well, but she sort of rekindled those feelings over time by kind of slowly falling in love with him again, because she's realized now that he is quite the catch. Yeah, Fred, he hasn't really been the whole thing. He's mostly been about the same, as he's been. But he's no longer obsessing over Daphne anymore, which is probably a sign that he started to return those feelings as well. But in any case, as they're talking, just establishing that. But Fred is currently eyeballing is currently the one examining the flintlock to actually figure out what it is, and which is what kind of causes Daphne to become a little annoyed with him. But Shaggy then proceeds to point out what exactly it is and wonders if the flintlock is in fact the treasure. But of course Velma points out that it most likely is not the treasure, pointing out that not only is the treasure supposedly immeasurable, but it's kind of weird that they only found the one piece, considering the planespheric disc was supposed to lead them to the treasure. And of course, they then proceed to examine that. They then proceed to examine it, and of course, they point out that it most likely is something important to actually get to the treasure. And of course, this is this point where the waitress from the Bloody Steak, she brings out a cheese platter, which of course Daphne finds several problems in, because she's a cheese connoisseur, as established in a previous episode, but. And she wonders why, and pointing out that the cheese seems a bit off. But the waitress points out that actually that's all the food they've got, and then proceeds to actually explain what's going on. She then proceeds to explain how several of the farms that normally supply them with food have been attacked, and they've stopped sending food. So she points out for that reason they've actually been resorting to dumpster diving, which is as gross as it sounds. In fact, they've been dumpster diving in other people's garbage for food that the other restaurants no longer want. So yeah, overall it's just really gross. But of course, Velma is of course the first person to point out that that's actually kind of gross. But Fred of course points out that that's obviously seems like it would be a lead worth following up on if all the farms surrounding the immediate area are actually getting attacked. And of course they decide to actually they decide to actually pile into the machine and go pay a visit to some of the farmers that had gotten attacked. And of course the first farmer they visit is the farmer that was in fact the one that kept Scooby in his farm, and of course Scooby and the farmer immediately come to blows. With Scooby not so sarcastically asking him very vehemently asking him if he's held any innocent animals hostage lately, and of course the two then proceed to get into a fight. But Shaggy decides to break it off before things get too ugly, and he then proceeds to tell and reminding Scooby that his girlfriend is watching, and of course he turns around and realizes that he should probably be setting a sample for Nova, and of course Nova is just innocently rolling in the dirt, which Scooby finds endearing and adorable. At which point the rest of the gang then proceed to ask the farmer what exactly happened, and of course he quickly points out that there is no farm anymore. He just takes a big gesture around, and the farm is just gone. There's nothing. It's literally just a silo where the farm used to be, and everything else has been razed to the ground. So and he points out what happened is that the horrible herd showed up and they ate everything in sight, except the silo. And then tells them that he's going to get out of there, and that if they're wise, they'll do the same as well. And of course, if they want more leads, there's several other farmers that got attacked as well, and that they'd probably be more than happy to actually investigate, and let them know what's up. And then he and his wife get on their tractor trailer and they take off. And of course, Velma points out that that actually seems like something they could look into. But so they go into a restaurant that's called which I forget what it's called. It's a cracker full of barrel full of crackers or something along that line. But of course, they then proceed to sit down and talk about, and of course, Fred tries to clarify the fact that they all got attacked by the horrible herd, which and when they asked him if he's got taters in his ears, he then reveals that actually no. He then actually checks, because in a little bit of character building, he reveals that he has been building traps since he was very little. And at one point, he got cave moss stuck in his ears trying to catch some frogs, but it eventually came out. Which and Velma just rolls her eyes, and of course, Shaggy and Scooby then proceed to wonder what they have to eat. Pointing out that obviously pointing out that they haven't eaten in a while, and also Scooby pointing out that Nova needs to eat as well. So the farmers that are in the restaurant, they pull out a bunch of crackers, which of course Shaggy points out is the only thing they got, and wonders if they got anything with more filling, but. At which point they just point out that they also found a weird roadkill cheese on the road, and that they scooped up, and of course Scooby and Shaggy then proceed to immediately start dunking their crackers into it, and Velma points out that that's actually disgusting, but then Scooby and Shaggy eat it and discover that it's actually quite delicious despite being found on the road. And of course, Daphne then proceeds to give it a whiff and points out that it smells a bit like honey, which she notes is a little bit odd. And of course, Velma also points out that that's odd, and wonders if they can tell them more about the horrible herd. And of course, the one farmer woman who's been talking tells them that they don't really have any other information other than that. Whenever the horrible herd shows up, the ground starts shaking. And sure enough, right on cue, the ground around the restaurant starts shaking. And while Shaggy is hoping it's a coincidence, Fred points out that it's probably not, and they immediately get into the mystery machine. While all the other farmers that are in there just proceed to get onto the respective tractors and proceed to drive off and as quickly away from the restaurant as possible. And of course, this is this point where the horrible herd then proceed to show up and proceed to chew up the restaurant and completely level it to the ground before focusing their attention on the farmers and Mystery Incorporated, and then proceed to chase after them. And sure enough, one by one, all of the farmers then proceed to get their tractors chewed up, and they are eventually run over by the horrible herd. And of course, and Velma urges, and Daphne urges Fred to actually speed up and go a little bit faster. But Fred does step on the gas, but it quickly becomes apparent that they're not going to be able to outspeed the herd that way. So Fred instead tells them all to buckle up and hold on, and then tells Daphne to hit what apparently he installed nitro in the mystery machine as well at some point. And then proceeds to press the button, and she proceeds to press the button, and then proceed to fly off as quickly as they can back towards Crystal Cove. And then proceed to go back to Daphne's house or mansion, where they then proceed to piece things together, and Shay and Scooby and Nova are actually kind of just kind of flirting in the corner, and Shaggy tells them that they're doing the thing where they gather around as Velma explains stuff, which happens a lot in the series, specific and all the time, not even just in Mystery Incorporated. That's just a thing because Velma's the smart one. But of course, Scooby then proceeds to get up, kisses Nova on the forehead, and then proceeds to wander over to the rest of the group, where Velma then proceeds to explain what she's figured out about how apparently all of the farms that have gotten hit have in fact formed a magnifying glass, which was the old Mystery Incorporated symbol. And at the center of the magnifying glass part of the magnifying glass is Destroido Corporation, and the whole entire attack has been centered around that. And of course, they quickly realize that Destroido might actually be the key to this mystery, and they then proceed to realize that Professor Pericles that the only person who could have actually made the horrible herd is Professor Pericles, because obviously Professor Pericles is an evil genius. Of course, he's going to be the person to make the horrible herd. At which point Daphne wonders if they actually have a way to actually spy on them, and points out that hot dog water must have hooked them up with something when she snuck in, and of course Velma proceeds to point out that she actually forgot, but hot dog water did in fact hook them up with a backdoor into Destroido so they can spy on them through the security system, and then she proceeds to do exactly that. And we then proceed to get a scene between Professor Pericles and Mr. E. And what we find out is that Mr. E does not like the horrible herd one bit. Because first and foremost, he points out that it's costing them a lot of Destroido's money and his money specifically. So for that reason, he's not particularly happy with the fact that Professor Pericles is blowing all of his money on the horrible herd, and also points out that a large portion of his science staff is presumed missing. Pointing out that at least 28 people have been attacked by the horrible herd trying to create it, and then another guy gets attacked while he's talking, so he increases that to 29. It's at this point where Professor Pericles points out that they can't make as he puts it, can't make a genius omelet without breaking a few worthless eggs, and then proceeds to not so sinisterly remark that he will break any egg that's in his way, and then both points out that not only has he killed Cassidy, which kind of confirms that we kind of understood that was kind of the thing he was behind, but also implies that he actually also killed Ed Machine as well, because we haven't seen Ed Machine throughout the entirety of the second season up until this point, and now we finally know why. Professor Pericles, when he went to go pay him a quote-unquote visit, he murdered him. So yeah, he already confirms that he killed 2 people. So yeah, I don't think that's ever been a thing that's in Scooby-Doo. Actually, I know it's not. I know it's not, because Scooby-Doo isn't that kind of show. They do not, literally the only show that's ever really tackled murder at any point is Velma, to the point, is the upcoming show Velma, which, to the point where it's in the trailers. So yeah, they haven't done anything like that. And at least until now, where they have confirmed that Professor Pericles has in fact killed 2 people. And he also sinisterly remarks that he will absolutely betray Mr. E if he gets in his way. And also during this conversation, it's revealed that Brad and Judy are now completely 100% on Professor Pericles' word. They will now do whatever he says unquestioningly, because, as they point out, he's a genius and the best genius. So they point out very honestly that they would very happily just do whatever he says. But it's at this point where Professor Pericles then proceeds to reveal what his evil plan is, and he then goes on to explain how he actually used genetic gene splicing and crossbreeding to successfully create a herd of cattle that is both part cow, obviously, but also part bee and part piranha. And then proceeds to explain how their entire thing is that they are completely dependent on what he says. They are controlled by him, and they only have one purpose: to level Crystal Cove to the ground, so that the new Mystery Incorporated has nowhere to hide. And that's essentially what he wants. He wants to level the town to the ground, so that way he can get the piece of the Playing Spirit disc from them when they are no longer able to hide from him. So yeah, kind of scary a little bit. He just wants to destroy Crystal Cove. And of course, once Mystery Incorporated hear that, they immediately spring into action and immediately run to the town hall to tell Mayor Nails and Sheriff Stone what's going on. And Mayor Nails and Sheriff Stone are revealed to actually be in the middle of a date. They are revealed to have actually been taking on couples cooking classes. And while Sheriff Stone openly admits that he thought they would be a little bit lame at first, it's then revealed that he actually figured out how to make a sombrero hat out of bacon, which is kind of cool. But which is kind of cool and also a little bit gross. But he then proceeds to make a sombrero hat out of bacon and put it on Mayor Nell's head. And he actually does remember her first name, but also he also accidentally calls her Janet Mayor Nettles, which is funny. But of course the two then proceed to have a romantic moment when the Sheriff Stone places it on her head, and she points out that she looks cute in it, and they go and proceed to lean in for a kiss when Mr. Incorporated then proceeds to barge in and then proceeds to explain how the horrible herd is about to actually level Crystal Cove and that they need to evacuate everybody. And of course Sheriff Stone points out that he actually doesn't buy it, pointing out that there's no way in hell that there's going to be some sort of horrible herd and that's not going to level the town. But then his deputy, who we haven't really heard speak up until now, but he has been a recurring character. I mean, obviously we had Deputy Bucky, but he hasn't been a thing. But the other new deputy, I don't know his name, but the deputy that replaced him, he comes in and tells Sheriff Stone that they need to evacuate the town, that the horrible herd is actually attacking the town. And of course Sheriff Stone quickly realizes that that just admits that he's been wrong before. At which point they proceed to climb up to the top of the town hall and then proceed to look out over the town to assess the damage. And it's revealed that the horrible herd has actually completely closed off Crystal Cove so that nobody can evacuate. They've completely chewed up the roads leading in and out of town, so nobody can leave, and now the horrible herd is just chewing their way through the town and just leveling everything. And while Professor Pericles and the old Mystery Incorporated watch from atop the Enigma engine, and Professor Pericles just kind of points out that everything seems to be going according to plan, and that so long as the horrible herd keep it up, he will eventually be able to drive out the new Mystery Incorporated, and swipe the Playing Spirit disc from them. And of course, this is at this point where Marinells points out that they need to come up with a plan. And Sheriff Stone, of course, just points out that obviously the first thing they should do is just submit fealty to the horrible herd, which Marinells points out is oddly endearing. But they also point out that he's not going anywhere and that they need to come up with some sort of plan to take the horrible herd down. At which point they then proceed to suggest that. At which point they then proceed to suggest that they actually, they proceed to think things through, and they then start wondering maybe there's a way to stop the horrible herd from attacking, and of course it's at this point where they start looking through their clues, and eventually Daphne's the one to put it together, and she then points out that obviously from everything that's only little pieces, but she does point out that from the softy cheese that they found. Scoob and Shaggy immediately point out that if they eat the stuff, you come up with an idea where if they eat the softy cheese, then maybe the horrible herd will leave them alone. And of course, Scooby and Shaggy point out that they're more than happy to put their life on the line for that kind of goal. But it's at this point where Daphne points out that no, that's not where she was going at all, and then proceeds to point out that obviously, since they're part B, there must be a queen somewhere in Destroido Corporation. That is actually controlling the horrible herd, and is actually and point out that if they can actually get it, and Velma points out that that's actually an idea so smart that she's surprised she didn't think of it first. But then proceeds to point out that if they do in fact steal this queen from Destroido Corporation, that maybe the horrible herd will abandon their attack on the town and go after the queen to actually defend her. And of course, Fred points out that they actually have the perfect tool for the job, revealing that apparently Fred Jones Sr., his fake father, he actually kept a helicopter on top of the town hall for emergencies. And of course, Mayor Nails reveals that they actually still have it. So they immediately pile it into the helicopter, and of course Sheriff Stone just asks if he can play co-pilot, but also points out that he does emphasize play because he actually has no idea how to actually fly a helicopter, and Mayor Nails merely tells him that he can be here co-pilot anytime, and then proceeds to finally have their first kiss, at which point Shaggy breaks it up, telling them that they need to focus, and they immediately get into the sky, fly into the sky, and immediately fly to Destroido Corporation, where they do discover a massive hole in the top of Destroido Corporation that is seemingly the nest for the horrible herd, and it's at this point where Fred points out that it's time for them to make history. I'm pointing out that nobody has ever trapped a bee that has never trapped a cow that's also a bee and also a queen. And then proceed to rappel into the hole on top of the Destroido Corporation, where they then proceed to arm themselves with industrial strength smoke guns. And Shaggy can't help, and Fred can't help but admire Daphne while she's putting hers on. I'm telling her that, and it kind of falls flat on his face, because the compliment he decides to pay her is that holding the industrial strength gun makes her oddly large hands look normal, which she takes as a compliment. So yeah, but in case they then proceed to gather up the smoke guns, and of course Professor Pericles saw them get into the helicopter trying to flee, and he does point out that for the moment they'll do nothing, because obviously they've obviously hidden the piece of the planet spirit disc in the town somewhere, and that if they're abandoning it, that means that they can actually go looking for it once the town is leveled. In case they then proceed to use the industrial strength smoke guns to just work their way through the nest, because obviously they're bees. Bee smokers are a thing. They're not a very humane thing, but they're a thing where people will spray their bees with smoking guns to get them to calm down so that they can harvest the honey. It's a way to keep them from getting stung, but it's not good for the bees, I don't think. At least I'm pretty sure it's not. But in case they then proceed to work their way slowly through the nest. And they do eventually find their way to the heart of the nest, where they do discover the queen bee, which is where the queen cow, I guess in this case, which is currently laying eggs to hatch more members of the horrible herd from. And it is at this point where they point out that must be the queen, and now they just need to get her back to the trap so that they can actually haul her out of town. And they then decide to task that very important task with Scooby and Shaggy, who do comment on the fact that they keep getting trusted with all of the really dangerous stuff. But Shaggy comments on the fact that it's most likely because they're jealous of their good looks, which is funny coming from Shaggy, but especially since Fred's the more handsome one. I'll be perfectly honest; he's always been the more handsome one. But in case Scooby and Shaggy then proceed to play catch with one of the eggs in the nest. and this eventually gets the attention of the queen bee, who of the queen cattle, who then proceeds to chase at to remove herself from the main central nest inside the horrible herd's nest, and proceeds to give chase after them, and they do of course book it to immediately toward where the helicopter is, and Nova's a very big help here. She does accompany them, and she does let them know when something is coming, but of course, Daphne scoops her up and tells her that she's a good girl, and which she is. And then they proceed to haul it back to where the helicopter is. And eventually, Scooby and Shaggy do eventually lower the horrible herd into the trap, where it's eventually scooped up in a large tarp and pulled out of the hole by the helicopter. And while Mr. Incorporated and Nova then proceed to pile back inside. And of course, much like they planned, the horrible herd does immediately go to the defense of its queen, who's currently calling for help from underneath the helicopter, and they immediately abandon their attack on the town. And Professor Pericles quickly realizes what they're doing. He quickly figures out that they're trying to ruin his plan. So he immediately asks Brad and Judy to arm the missile, and of course, Mr. E is wondering what exactly all of that cost him. Since obviously this is the first time he's hearing of the fact that they have a missile. But Professor Pericles merely scolds him, telling him that they do have a missile, and calls him an idiot in German. And then Brad and Judy proceed to pull out a rocket launcher, barely missing Mr. E, who ducks out of the way. And then proceeds to and Mr. Incorporated, they see the missile coming and immediately tell Mayor Nails to dodge out of it, but she barely gets hit by it. It takes off the tail propeller, which causes the helicopter to go into a bit of a nose spin, and Nova winds up almost falling out of the helicopter, and Scooby, Shaggy, and Velma form a human chain to try and grab her and pull her back into the helicopter, and Nova eventually does lose her grip, even though Scooby is trying his best to pull her back in, and she eventually falls and gets trampled by the horrible herd in a scene very reminiscent from the Lion King. It's very much a reference to the Lion King, but yeah. It is very much looks like something from the Lion King. She gets trampled, but eventually Fred realizes that they need to actually lose the queen, and they then decide to cut her loose, and she winds up going flying into the ocean. And at which point Mayor Nels performs an emergency landing, and they immediately pile out of the helicopter, which explodes shortly after. At which point the rest of the horrible herd then proceeds to follow their queen into the ocean. Which of course Daphne points out that she feels bad for the horrible herd, pointing out that it's not their fault that they're deranged mutant evil cattle. But it's then at this point where the horrible herd are revealed to be completely fine. They fell into the ocean, but nothing happened. At which point Fred remembers that they're actually part fish and that they can survive in the ocean. And sure enough, the horrible herd then proceed to go off and go swim into the ocean. And Velma wonders what they've done, and Shaggy then adds a rhetorical question, remarking, other than dunking the entirety of the horrible herd into the ocean, which of course points out that they probably irreparably damaged the ecosystem. And Sheriff Stone points out that this is just one of those instances where they just need to walk away, and they just slowly back away from the problem they've caused, and then proceed to go look for Nova. And Scooby does wind up finding her collar, and Shaggy just reassures him that they'll find her. At which point they continue their search, and they do eventually find her, battered and bruised but still alive. And Scooby remarks that they need to actually get her to a hospital. And they immediately go off to go do that. Meanwhile, Professor Pericles, he's not happy about the fact that the Mr. Incorporated have in fact ruined his plans. He delivering his version of the Meddling Kids line, and he ominously states that they're going to pay for ruining his plan, and that he's still got more cooked up. At which point the episode ends. And yeah, that's basically where Professor Pericles is at. So, first and foremost, this episode starts to form a rift between Mr. E and Professor Pericles, since obviously they had been working together up until this point, but the horrible herd was kind of the first straw to kind of tip Mr. E away from working with Professor Pericles again, because obviously Professor Pericles, he created a giant mutant cattle to just level the town to the ground, which of course is where Mr. E has finally started having second thoughts. He's very much like, this was expensive to make, and also I've lost a lot of people. Maybe working with Professor Pericles wasn't such a good idea. But also, Brad and Judy are now currently very, very much hooked on every word Professor Pericles says, which is problematic. And of course, it's a very obvious point that that obviously he didn't succeed in leveling the town. Of course, they can easily repair most of the damage that the horrible herd caused, even though he did level a lot of the town. They can fix most of it. It's fine. They can absolutely repair the town and put it back together again. But that's going to take a while. And then there's also the fact that the horrible herd have just been released in the ecosystem, and that's going to cause problems, presumably. Not sure in the run of the series, but definitely the fact that they've released mutant cattle into the ocean is going to be a problem. So yeah, we're going to see, or maybe we'll see how that goes. I don't know. That's just a thing that happens. That's just a thing that casually happens. It's just the horrible herd escape into the ocean, and that is going to be a problem at some point, because obviously that's just going to be a big deal. That's an issue that they caused. But in any case, yeah, that's going to do it for my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. What you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to go check out my Patreon in the description below as well. It's only a couple bucks a month. It does really help me out. And you guys get access to a bunch of cool perks out of my way of saying thanks. So be sure to go check those out. Links down in the description. Yeah, be sure to also go check out my my Discord. Link is down in the description as well. I want to do more stuff with that. I want to do a watch along with that at some point, so go check those out. Be sure to go check out my my Twitter. I post updates over there. Be sure to go check those out. Be sure to also go check out all my other things. I have a throne. You can go suggest things to me there. Like gifts and stuff like that, you know, just things. I've also suggested a couple of things that you can help me foot the bill for, but and also just go check out all those other things. I have a card. Go check all of those things out there on my Twitter. But in any case, yeah. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent one. It may or may not be this one. Or some bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!